Albion Online is a free-to-play sandbox MMO with an emphasis on the ability to play the game any way you like and reach whatever goal you have set for yourself. Do you want to master combat? You can do so. Do you want to be a master crafter? You can do so. Do you want to own an island and maintain a thriving farm? You can do so. It's all true. You can do whatever you want, as long as you adhere to the biggest and most important rule of Albion Online. Always be grinding. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a casual review, a series where I play and review games so you can decide if you want to try them out. In this video, we're going to be taking an in-depth look at Albion Online and reviewing how the game presents itself to new players as they navigate the game. The game advertises itself as free-to-play, and I find it very important to discuss how free-to-play games convert their new players into paying customers. If you're looking to try out the game or haven't seen much about it, we will be discussing some of the key parts of the new player experience and the game itself that you will need to understand. As far as gameplay, the game allows you to take on whatever challenge you want whenever you want, and provides a sense of progression through achievements and tiered difficulty content. It is very good at providing a sense of accomplishment and freedom on the surface, but there is one thing that new players are going to be made very well aware of from the start. This game is all about grinding, and Albion Online doesn't shy away from that fact. It very openly tells you in many ways that in order to get better at fighting, you will have to fight more. In order to get better at crafting, you will have to craft more. And this is where we must break down and review the game, because even though there is a lot to enjoy, new players will be forced to make the tough decision to keep grinding or stop playing. A few disclaimers before we begin. I did not reach the quote-unquote endgame to review the new player experience. I've put in about 25 in-game hours on one character, and have tried to take part in anything that seemed accessible to new players as they progress through the game. Just keep in mind that this is a review of how new players see the game, not how veterans have come to understand the inner workings of the system. But as you will see, we can tell quite a bit about the game from the first 25 hours. A reminder that a lot of this review is going to be opinion. While I will provide factual evidence of everything I experienced in the game, whether or not I feel that subject is positive or negative is purely my opinion. With that said, let's start the new player review by diving into the different gameplay aspects of Albion Online. Albion Online is a sandbox MMO, which basically means that you have an open world that you can interact with in many different ways, and you can choose which interaction you want to be a part of at any given time. The main difference that sandbox MMOs have with other MMOs is a lack of a driven gameplay element, usually a storyline or a questing system. For example, in RuneScape, another sandbox MMO, you have a large amount of questing that you can do, but if you choose not to do the quests, you aren't kept from completing other content, and you can progress or level up in other ways. In MMORPGs such as World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy Online, the world may be large and the interactions plentiful, but a player is driven towards a single interaction, mainly progression points that lead to completing a story or getting to a specific endgame content through the acquisition of gear or other forms of player power. These are considered theme park MMOs, where the player's focus has been centered on getting to the theatrical and extremely well-built part of the game, rather than the game building a world that the player can use to find their own enjoyment. The differences and strengths of the two types of MMOs could take a whole video on its own to discuss, but for now, just know that Albion Online is a sandbox MMO, and so its gameplay is developed to tailor to a wide array of possible experiences. The biggest example of this is the lack of any quests in Albion Online. This was something that was really jarring to me at first. I came from World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy Online, and RuneScape, all games that have quests in some sort of way. Albion Online has none. There is a tutorial, which is given to you in the form of some quick quests, but after the tutorial is complete, you are left all alone to figure out your own path in the game. Luckily, there are plenty of things to do in the game to keep your attention. The first and most important gameplay mechanic is the Destiny board. This is where you will find your desired path of progression. It is very well organized and easy to read, so you are very quickly able to find where you are at any stage in the game. As you complete any type of task, you gain fame or experience points for that specific task. Once you gain enough fame in a specific node, you will achieve a mastery level for that specific skill, and unlock a new node to work towards. Most nodes also have multiple levels within themselves, so you can continue to level your basic skills to max potential. The Destiny board is organized to very clearly show what your different options are for the progression in the game. For example, as a sandbox MMO, Albion Online does not have you choose any type of class up front. Instead, it allows you to wield a weapon set or an armor set and gain fame with that specific weapon or armor. I chose to be a heavy armor axe wielder, where after some training I was able to dual wield axes and wear highly defensive armor. But if I wanted to try out being a mage or a bow user, all I would have to do is equip that weapon type and my abilities would change. Same goes for my armor type. Each weapon type or armor type provides you a specific set of skills, and there are different qualities of each type to improve their item power. So once I equipped the new weapon, I would just continue battling enemies and I would level up in those skills. I don't lose any experience in my axes, so now I can switch my weapons as long as I'm out of combat. The crafting and gathering professions are on the Destiny board as well. If I want to craft an axe that I can use to train my combat skills, I can do so, but I will need to gather the necessary materials, which gives me fame in my gathering nodes, and then I would need to go to a blacksmithing station and craft the axe, which gives me fame in my crafting node. If I want to craft a staff, I would just do the same thing, but I would be gathering different materials and craft on a mage tower instead. This all sounds really great, and to be honest, it's very satisfying. However, it's important to note the main consequence of this design. This means that the entire game is centered around you grinding whatever you want to progress in, for the entirety of your gameplay. So let's talk a bit about that. As I mentioned before, anything you do will net you some fame in that skill, and once you get enough fame, you will level up in that skill. This means that in my certain progression path, whichever path that I choose to follow, I will have a number of different nodes that I will want to, or in some cases need to, level up. And the only way to level up nodes is to repeat that skill over and over again. This isn't exactly an issue. This is the game's way of interpreting the practice makes perfect progression mantra. Most games do this in some way, but there are a couple reasons why this gets a little bit tedious in Albion Online. In my opinion, the biggest reason is the depth of the skill tree and the time it takes to level up anyone's skill. I really like the detail and the freedom to choose whatever I want to do with one character, but with so many options comes a feeling of being overwhelmed, not by the amount of choices, but rather the time it will take to level up any of the nodes. The game is fast-paced enough at first to get you started and into a great place in terms of crafting or combat, but once you get further into the game, you start to quickly realize that it takes a lot of time to do anything, and this is multiplied by any choice that you are making more than once. Let's start with combat. I mentioned already that if you want to switch weapons or armor, you can, and it's relatively simple. There are no classes or barriers to choosing a specific weapon type. There is, however, a barrier to power in those specific weapon types. The barrier being that in order to be skilled and powerful with any type of weapon or armor type, you have to use that weapon or armor type while killing enemies and gain fame. This is not a problem at lower levels, but I'm sure you can see where this may lead to long repetitive grinds later on. For the first 20 hours of playing the game, I really wanted to get powerful in dual axes, which I started to do, and in 20 hours of playing the game, I got to level 20 out of 100 in axes, and 7 out of 100 in bear paws, the dual-wielding axes. Granted, this was including the time I spent farming materials to craft them myself, and to get enough money to buy some of the materials that I couldn't farm, but it felt good, and I had a lot of fun doing that. But then I got absolutely clobbered in a random PvP encounter, and I figured that I would try out some of the other weapon types to see how they work and if I liked any of them. So I bought myself a basic fire staff, and I went to try it out, and I was weak. I was all the way back at square one again, and it was going to take me a very long time to get back to the same power level as my axes, and I just didn't feel like grinding dungeons that many times just to get back to the same place in my progression, so I switched back to axes. And that is the same with gathering and crafting. Gathering is easier because you can go out into sections of the map that have specific types and tiers of resources noted for you. But even this takes time, because you need to gather large quantities of those resources to level up, and generally keep searching the area, since nodes run out rather quickly. Also, if you don't have a specific resource of a certain tier in your area of the map, you'll have to travel into those areas to start gathering. I'm sure this gets even a little bit more difficult when you get to the tier of resources that are only available in PvP areas, where if another player kills you, you lose your inventory. I'm not saying this is a bad mechanic. It's risk versus reward, and it adds value to those items at higher tiers. But this does mean that you have to be prepared to grind and deal with PvP at the same time, potentially losing the materials you would have had to actually craft any items at that tier. Crafting then is a whole nother beast. Crafting an item gives you fame in crafting that specific item. The groupings are the same as combat masteries. You start by crafting any warrior weapon, and that gives you the ability to craft more warrior weapons. Then you craft one of those new warrior weapons, and now you are specialized in that specific item. For example, In order to craft the lowest tier of bear paws, the dual axes that I use, I have to first level up my axe crafting ability by crafting low-level axes. But before I start leveling up my axe crafting ability, I first have to level up my warrior crafting ability, and all of this takes resources and currency to craft. This is exactly the same for any other item I would want to craft, even within the same grouping. I can level up bear paws to be able to craft any tier, but I would have to grind all over again if I wanted to start crafting battle axes, or great axes, or any of the other axe family items. Not to mention, if I wanted to craft bows or magic weapons or armor, I would have to start all over again with them and gather different types of resources. Now all of this I just talked about gets immensely easier with learning points, a currency that you can spend on skills to upgrade them once you have earned 20% of the fame that would be needed to level that skill. But you only have a certain amount of learning points, and as skills get to higher tiers, they require more learning points to upgrade. So it's definitely not a bypass to the grind, but it definitely helps. I know it may seem like I'm painting the grind of Albion Online to be some terrible thing that the game forces you to do, but I really don't feel that way. It's a lot, yeah, but it's very rewarding as a process. I think you just have to know what you're getting into before you start the game, or else it'll be very easy to get overwhelmed. To me, it just means that I have to be in the right mood to play the game. This is a game where I will watch YouTube or talk with friends or listen to music and play for long periods of time to relax and enjoy whatever part of the game that I want to grind. But with the entire game being based on grinding, there's one major thing that the game relies on heavily to provide a driving force behind all of this supply and demand: the player-to-player marketplace. I've mentioned in my other videos that I love to go into a game and try and play the economy. I love trying to make as much money as possible by selling things on the auction house or other player-to-player markets. It's satisfying as hell. And I think this is probably one of the coolest parts of Albion Online. Everything in the game is made by players. Even the loot that you get in dungeons has a crafting tag on it. Players can make items and then sell it on the black market, which should then get distributed to the dungeons and enemy drops around the world. The black market will tell you what is needed, and players can meet the demand for a large chunk of silver, the in-game currency. As the game demands more of an item, the price for that item goes up and incentivizes players to craft that item and sell it on the black market. It's a cool idea, and if I play it enough, it might be one that I would actually enjoy to take part in. But let's get back to the normal player-to-player market. Any item that is available in the game can be found here. Players can sell whatever they have on them, and others will buy it. And this comes into play a lot, because progression in this game can be heavily impacted by the availability and cost of items. Let's quickly discuss the impact of the player-to-player market on the game. The most important resource a player can have in the real world is time. Time is always in competition. If the player spends their time on your game, then they are making damn sure that they are spending it as efficiently and effectively as possible. And that's where purchasing items in Albion Online comes in. Albion Online's entire world revolves around the grind. You must grind to progress in any content, and grinding takes an immense amount of time. It's only human nature to want to bypass the time that is unenjoyable so you can grind only parts of the game that are important to you and provide you with the most fun. So how do you cut down on the grinding of resource gathering or crafting or finding better weapons? You buy them. If you need materials for crafting a weapon and you don't want to spend countless hours trying to gather all the resources, just buy them. In fact, if your goal is to just get more powerful and go dungeon dive or PvP at higher tiers, just buy better weapons and gear. If you have enough silver, you can buy literally anything. So the gameplay loop becomes, get gear, get more silver, get better gear. And you do this over and over again, and it puts a lot of importance on the economy and the ability for you to make money in the game. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, but here's where our opinions may differ. In my time playing the game, I did not buy the premium subscription. I also did not go into the in-game cash shop and buy in-game gold for real money. But these options exist, and they provide a small benefit to those who take advantage of it. So let's discuss. I think I have to legally state in my video that the following is just my opinion, and my opinion was formed after 25 hours of in-game playing. So this is just my first look at how the subscription and in-game cash shop plays a part in the new player's experience and how the game sells itself to make money. The game sells itself in three ways. First, and probably the least intrusive way, is the in-game cosmetic cash shop, where you can buy mounts and other small cosmetics to show off to other players in the game. The second way is the premium subscription, which seems pretty reasonable to me. If you pay $10 a month, you get benefits including increased farming rates and increased silver from loot, as well as access to some large parts of the game, like owning an entire island that you can use to farm food and hire laborers to increase production. I didn't get to try that because I haven't paid yet. I'm sure it provides a pretty damn good boost to your silver income. You can argue that this is pay to win, but at least it's somewhat reasonable. The benefits are definitely noticeable, but at my level, it didn't make me feel like things were extremely unattainable. It just meant that my grinds were longer. If you are dedicated enough and notice the difference affecting your gameplay, maybe at that point you would want to spend the $10 a month to support the game that you seem to be enjoying. But the third way, and the one that requires a bit more conversation, is the ability to buy gold, which then you can exchange in game to get silver, which you use to buy items on the player market. This is exactly how bonds work in RuneScape or how the WoW token works in World of Warcraft, and this throws a little wrench into the debate of pay to win. First of all, I don't think this game is pay to win, but you can't ignore the fact that because the player-to-player market is such a large part of the game for new players, being able to straight up purchase anything in the game using real money transactions does present an argument for it. The way I look at it, it's very simple. Does using real money transactions, or RMT, benefit your in-game player power or progression? And in Albion Online, it kind of does. If a new player who doesn't purchase in-game money with RMT tries to get a top-tier weapon off the player marketplace, it could take months before they're able to get it. But if a new player spent some real-life money on an in-game currency, they would be able to buy it immediately. Of course, they would still need to train enough to be able to use it, but they will have an advantage in purchasing it. And this goes for any item. Do you want to buy more crafting materials? Or how about a better mount to carry all those resources in your bag? Just buy some gold. Now, I want to argue the fact that despite everything I just said, I truly don't think that Albion is pay to win. Pay to win has some serious negative connotation to it, obviously because the goal of most pay to win games is to win, and paying to get a serious advantage to win is going to be harmful to those who don't pay. But Albion Online doesn't make you feel like you are at a disadvantage. The way that the game plays means that you could have the best gear possible, but you aren't necessarily guaranteed an advantage. In PvE, someone who is more skilled than you will do more damage, regardless if you have a better tier weapon than they do. And with the game being full loot PvP, a lower tier player could come along and be much more skilled than you, and your weapons would drop when you die, and your real money transaction is going to go to another player. In addition, items in the game are never really hidden behind a paywall. And even though they may take more time to get, the game does a good job at providing a reasonable way to get there. So I wouldn't call it pay to win necessarily, but maybe pay to reduce the grind. But if you are a new player, I wouldn't worry about it too much. It never becomes a large enough problem in the game, but if you feel like you want to spend money to reduce the grind, then it's there if you want it. All things considered, I think they did a pretty good job at providing a way to buy in-game currency without messing with the state of the game. The flip side of this is that you can pay for your subscription using gold, which, because you can buy gold with silver, you could potentially pay enough silver to buy yourself your own subscription. This would probably be daunting for new players, but for higher players that frequent more expensive items and generally have more silver, this is much more feasible. But I just talked a whole lot about the game's design. Now let's take a quick look at the actual new player gameplay. Creating a character in Albion Online is really quick and simple. There aren't many choices, but the graphics aren't super flashy anyway. It's all about the style, and it looks good for what it is. After creating a character, you are shipwrecked on an island, and you meet up with some other shipwrecked people. You go through a very short sequence teaching you the basics of the class system, combat, gathering, and crafting, and moving around to explore. You are also introduced to the basics of the Destiny board and how progression works. Then you are moved into the next zone. You are brought into a cove where the rest of the shipwreck crew is trying to fix the boat you came in on and get back to the mainland. This is where you can find all the other players who are playing the tutorial at the same time as you. This is where you will learn how to interact with different crafting shops and how to gather certain materials. At this point, the tutorial gives you a bit more of an in-depth look at the basics that you just learned. You must go and gather a certain amount of materials, craft a certain tier of armor, get a basic mount, and interact with a very basic player market. You are then asked to engage in a couple of very basic combat quests to introduce you to a bit more difficult combat with the very basic mechanic of dodging red circles and lines. You then complete a basic quest to get your ship off the island, and you choose where you want to start the game. There are 5 locations, and the choice you make determines where you start on the main map, but not where you need to stay. This could be a large decision though, depending on what resources you want most abundant around you. For example, the Mountain Cross has a bunch of ore, stone, and fiber, and the Swamp Cross has an abundance of fiber, hide, and wood. You can get every resource anywhere you go, it just may be harder to reach them, so I chose a step cross because I wanted to craft warrior weapons with ore and bags with fiber, but honestly I just gave it my best guess since I didn't really look that far into the crafting system before I chose. You are brought to wherever you chose to start, and you are given a few more basic tasks. This is to make sure that you are taught a few more systems that you can take part in now that you are on the mainland. You are told to go gather resources from a nearby zone, craft something, and then try out one of the solo dungeons that you can queue into from inside the town. And after completing those quests, you are now off on your own. The game tells you that you are free to do whatever you want, and then sends you on your way. As tutorials go, it wasn't that bad. It was a little long, but thankfully, because you can do anything you want on one character, I don't really feel a need to create another one and go through the tutorial again. I don't know if more dedicated players have alts, but as a new player, I'm okay with grinding enough on one character. But that's it. From here on out, you just do whatever you want. No quests or anything to give you a specific direction. So what do you do then? As a new player thrust into the world with so many options to choose from? Well, I can't really tell you what you should do, but I can tell you what I did. I changed my weapon to an axe because from the start of the game, I really wanted to try and dual wield with heavy armor. In my head, this was a tanky brawler, and I loved the idea of it, so I made it a reality. The first 5 hours of my gameplay was just me gathering and crafting enough to start building up my crafting skill to be able to actually make the weapon myself. I set my sights on the bear paws, the dual-wielding axes, and I set off on the journey. Eventually, I crafted enough battle axes to be able to craft the bear paws. I was overjoyed, and I went to the warrior crafting shop to see what materials I needed to make the weapons, and I was immediately sad. I had to get a special item called Keeper Axe Heads, which you had to get from an enchanting vendor that was in the nearby city. I said, okay, that's fine. How much do they cost? And I got a little more sad, because the Keeper Axe Heads don't cost silver from the enchanter. Instead, you give the enchanter some magical medallions or something, and it gives you a chance to receive the item you want. I said, okay. I come from World of Warcraft. I've dealt with chance loot before. How hard is it to get these magical medallions he wants so badly? Apparently, they are only found as loot in open world dungeons, and out of all of the magical rune loot that you can get, the medallions I need are the rarest to drop. And I need 30 of them for one chance at getting my Keeper Axe Heads. So I took my sadness and I went to a dungeon and I ran it a couple times. And I didn't get a single one, so I ran it again. I ran more dungeons, and by the time I got one, I had spent pretty much a solid 4 hours just running the same dungeons over and over again. I didn't mind dungeons. I honestly enjoy them, because the combat to me is engaging and pretty difficult at some points, but I really wanted my dual-wielding axes. I felt like my life in Albion couldn't start until I fulfilled that goal and assumed my proper identity as a tanky brawler, so I did what any true gamer would do. I pulled up my gamer gear panties, went to the player market, and bought the axe heads I needed for silver. 12 hours of gameplay later, I ran myself back to the warrior crafting shop, I crafted those bear paws, and I equipped my new Albion Online identity, @Jackie the Metal Brawler. From there on out, I would try different types of content. I did solo expeditions in PvP. I didn't really like the solo expeditions because they seemed like easier versions of the open world dungeons and had terrible loot in comparison. But I actually really liked the PvP. I lost a lot, but at one point with my awesome new bear paws, I got a total of 3 kills in one match, so I took that as a win. At the end of my 25 hours, the main things that I like to do are solo and group dungeon dives, corrupted dungeon dives, which is basically a demonic version of a regular dungeon where you could be invaded by another human player who can steal your rewards. And finally, I like PvP. The crafting got a little much for me, but it's still in the back of my mind as something I would want to keep doing eventually. I just ended up getting caught in the chase for better and better gear by defeating tougher and tougher enemies. In my opinion, Albion Online is a very well made game. I think it is exactly what it sets out to be. Nothing more and nothing less. Do I think it's the perfect game? No. I honestly can't see myself paying for anything in the game, or being that invested in it. The games that I like to invest myself in are not usually so repetitive or grindy, but I can't argue that after 25 hours of playing, I still want to hop on and grind some more. I just hope that as I get into higher tiered content, the gameplay still feels as good as it does now. But who knows? Maybe it will lose its shine like crafting has for me already, or maybe I will find new things to keep my attention and combat will remain enjoyable for me. The good thing is that I can choose whatever I want to do. So if you want to try it out, I think you have to play this game with the correct expectations. This is not going to be an extremely flashy game at first. To get to the higher tiered content, you will have to grind, and that means repetitive content for probably many hours. But if you are ready to do that, then do try out this game. There really is no obligation to pay unless you want to invest more into the game. What many people do, and what I plan on doing, is maintaining my free account and hopping back on every so often when I'm in the mood to make some silver. My next goal is to try and make enough silver to buy enough gold to pay for a membership fee. This game is grindy, and as new players, not everyone is going to like that. You will find out very early in the game if the type of content that Albion Online has to offer is something that you find enjoyable. If you do happen to try it out, I would love to hear your thoughts on the game, and if you agree with my analysis of it. And if you are a veteran of the game, who has played many more hours than I have, I would love to hear your thoughts on how the game is doing as a whole. But most importantly, I hope you enjoyed the video, because that's what I really care about. Remember to leave a like if you liked it, and subscribe to the channel for more content. I hope you enjoy your Albion adventures, and I can't wait to see what we talk about next.